Most of us think aging and high blood sugar are two separate battles. One is about getting older, the other is about diabetes. But what if I told you there's one powerful solution that protects you from both? It isn't a pill. It isn't some fancy supplement. It's muscle. Muscle isn't just about strength or looking fit. It's the very tissue that guards you against premature aging and out of control glucose. Every time you move, every time your muscles contract, they act like a sponge, soaking up excess sugar from your blood, lowering your risk of diabetes, and keeping your body young from the inside out. So, if you want to age slower, stay stronger, and control your glucose naturally, then it's time to understand why muscle is not just about fitness, it's your secret weapon for health and longevity. Muscle is the body's most powerful glucose regulator, more effective than insulin alone. Most people think of glucose control as something that depends almost entirely on insulin, but that's only part of the story. In fact, the largest glucose sink in the entire human body is skeletal muscle. Around 80% of the glucose that enters your bloodstream after a meal is disposed of by muscle tissue. That means your muscles are doing far more than just helping you move, lift, or run. They are silently acting as your most critical partner in regulating blood sugar. Without healthy, active muscle mass, insulin has a much harder time doing its job, and the result is higher glucose levels, more fat storage, and faster aging. When we talk about high blood sugar, diabetes, or even prediabetes, the common approach is to focus on insulin. Doctors prescribe drugs that try to increase insulin release or improve its sensitivity. But few people realize that you already carry the most potent glucose regulating tool inside your own body. Unlike fat tissue or the liver, muscle cells respond to glucose in a way that is almost miraculous. Even in the absence of insulin, your muscles can take up glucose through contraction. That means when you exercise, walk, or even perform small movements throughout the day, your muscles are actively clearing sugar out of your bloodstream without needing permission from insulin. This is why movement is so powerful in controlling diabetes and preventing glucose spikes. Think about what happens after you eat a meal rich in carbohydrates. Your blood sugar rises, your pancreas releases insulin, and the job of insulin is to push glucose into the cells. But insulin cannot force glucose into fat cells very effectively. It relies heavily on muscle tissue to open up and accept glucose. If you have more muscle mass, there are more doors for glucose to enter, and the body can regulate blood sugar far more efficiently. On the other hand, if you have very little muscle mass, those doors are limited and glucose builds up in the blood. That leads to chronically high glucose, insulin resistance, and eventually diabetes. This is why muscle is more powerful than insulin alone. Insulin is like a key, but if there are not enough locks, meaning muscle fibers, then the key can only do so much. When you build muscle through resistance training, lifting weights, or even bodyweight exercises, you are literally creating more locks for insulin to use. At the same time, you are enhancing your ability to dispose of glucose even without insulin. That makes muscle both an insulin-dependent and insulin-independent glucose regulator. Beyond regulating glucose, muscle protects you from the dangerous consequences of high blood sugar. Chronically elevated glucose damages blood vessels, nerves, and organs. It accelerates aging at the cellular level through processes like glycation, where excess sugar sticks to proteins and makes them dysfunctional. Muscle fights this by keeping glucose levels stable, reducing spikes after meals, and preventing that chronic sugar damage that leads to wrinkles, memory decline, and frailty with age. Perhaps the most empowering truth is that muscle health is within your control. You don't need a prescription to build it. You don't need complicated technology. By engaging your muscles consistently through strength training, regular walking, climbing stairs, or any form of resistance work, you are strengthening your body's most reliable glucose sink. You are enhancing your ability to age well, stay strong, and keep energy levels high. Muscle is not just a reflection of fitness, it is a reflection of metabolic health. When we see muscle this way, it changes the conversation around health entirely. Instead of only looking at insulin and glucose in a lab test, we should be asking, how much muscle does this person have, and how well are they using it? Because in the end, muscle is more than movement. It is medicine. It is the single most powerful natural regulator of blood sugar, and without it, no drug, no pill, and no hormone can fully protect you. The more muscle you build, the slower you age at the cellular level, Aging is often seen as a process we cannot control, something that happens to everyone no matter what. But science is showing us that while we cannot stop time, we can influence how our bodies respond to it. The difference between someone who simply grows older and someone who grows older while staying vibrant, strong, and sharp often comes down to one factor: muscle. Muscle is not just about physical strength or appearance, it is deeply connected to the biology of aging itself. Every extra bit of muscle you build acts as a shield against the cellular breakdown that makes us weaker, slower, and sicker with age. At the core of aging lies something scientists call mitochondrial decline. Mitochondria are the energy factories of our cells, and as we age, they tend to become less efficient, producing more waste and less clean energy. This decline accelerates fatigue, frailty, and many age-related diseases. But muscle tissue is uniquely rich in mitochondria, and the more muscle you build, the more mitochondria you develop and maintain. Exercise, especially resistance training, forces mitochondria to adapt and grow stronger, reversing some of the decline that usually comes with aging. In this way, muscle acts as a direct anti-aging tool at the cellular level by keeping the engines of your cells youthful and efficient. Another cellular marker of aging is something called chronic inflammation. As we age, our bodies often exist in a low-grade inflammatory state, sometimes called inflammaging. This inflammation damages cells, breaks down tissues, and increases the risk of diseases like Alzheimer's, arthritis, and cardiovascular problems. Building muscle is one of the most powerful antidotes to this process. Active muscle tissue releases anti-inflammatory compounds known as myokines whenever you use it. These myokines travel throughout your body, calming inflammation and protecting your cells from damage. In this sense, muscle doesn't just fight aging locally, it sends out signals that slow the aging process systemically. Another key part of cellular aging is glucose damage. High blood sugar, when left unchecked, leads to glycation, a process where sugar molecules stick to proteins, making them stiff, dysfunctional, and old. This is why people with diabetes often show accelerated aging in their skin, eyes, and organs. Building muscle slows this process dramatically because muscle acts as a sponge for glucose. The more muscle you have, the more glucose your body can clear out of the bloodstream quickly, leaving less behind to damage tissues. This protective effect helps preserve not just your metabolic health, but also the youthful function of your skin, brain, and blood vessels. Muscle also plays a role in protecting something called telomeres. Telomeres are the protective caps on the ends of your DNA strands. Every time your cells divide, telomeres shorten, and when they become too short, the cell can no longer function properly. This shortening is one of the most reliable signs of biological aging. Research has shown that people who engage in regular resistance training and maintain higher muscle mass tend to have longer telomeres, meaning their cells remain biologically younger. Building muscle literally slows down the clock inside your cells. It is also important to consider how muscle influences hormones that affect aging. As people lose muscle with age, their levels of growth hormone, testosterone, and estrogen decline faster, and their cortisol levels often rise. This hormonal shift accelerates muscle breakdown and speeds up aging. By preserving and building muscle, you help maintain a healthier hormonal balance, which not only supports strength, but also energy, mood, and resilience. In other words, muscle is not just an effect of hormones, it also helps regulate them in a way that slows aging. When you put all of these pieces together, the conclusion is clear. Building muscle is one of the most powerful levers you have to slow the biological processes of aging. While skin creams, supplements, and even medical treatments often promise to turn back the clock, none of them affect the fundamental drivers of aging at the cellular level the way muscle does. Every rep you do, every walk you take, every challenge you give your muscles sends a message to your body that it is not time to grow old yet. It tells your cells to stay strong, to keep energy production high, to fight inflammation, and to protect DNA. The more muscle you build, the more you tip the balance of your biology in favor of youthfulness. It is not about looking like a bodybuilder or chasing aesthetics. It is about building enough lean tissue to keep your body resilient, your metabolism flexible, and your cells biologically younger than your chronological age. In this way, muscle is not only a symbol of vitality, it is the very fabric of a longer, stronger, and healthier life. Muscle is not just strength, it's your metabolic armor against diabetes. For decades, Diabetes has been treated as if it were simply a problem of blood sugar and insulin, but the truth is much deeper than that. Diabetes is not just about what happens in the pancreas, it is about how the entire body handles energy. And no tissue is more central to that process than muscle. Muscle is where most of the sugar from your blood is stored and used. Muscle is where energy is burned, and it is muscle that determines whether the food you eat is fueling health or fueling disease. Without sufficient muscle mass, the body's ability to control blood sugar collapses, and the risk of diabetes rises dramatically. When glucose enters the bloodstream, it has to go somewhere. If it stays in the blood, it becomes toxic, damaging tissues and accelerating aging. Insulin is supposed to move that glucose into cells, but fat tissue cannot take in very much, and the liver has only a limited capacity. That leaves muscle as the primary site where glucose can be stored safely as glycogen or burned for fuel. In fact, research shows that about 70 to 80% of the glucose that clears from the blood after a meal ends up in muscle. That means your muscles are like massive storage tanks protecting you against spikes in blood sugar. If those tanks are full because you don't move much, or if the tanks are too small because you don't have much muscle mass, then glucose lingers in the blood, and insulin resistance begins to build. This is why muscle is more than strength. It is your shield against diabetes. Strong, active muscle tissue acts like an enormous sponge for sugar. The contractions of your muscles during exercise allow glucose to enter cells even without insulin. This is called non-insulin mediated glucose uptake. And it is one of the most powerful tools your body has to regulate blood sugar naturally. Every time you walk, lift, or move, you are telling your muscles to soak up sugar and lower blood glucose levels, no matter how resistant your cells may have become to insulin. That is why people who exercise regularly, especially with resistance training, show better glucose control, even if their diet has not changed dramatically. The opposite is also true. When muscle is lost through aging, inactivity, or illness, the protective armor begins to crack. Less muscle means fewer glucose storage sites and less glucose burning capacity. This forces insulin to work harder, flooding the system with higher and higher levels in a desperate attempt to push sugar into the cells. Eventually, the cells stop listening, and blood sugar remains chronically high. This is the textbook definition of type 2 diabetes. In that sense, diabetes is as much a disease of muscle failure as it is of insulin failure. What makes this so empowering is that unlike age, genetics, or many other risk factors for diabetes, muscle health is something you can control. You can build muscle at almost any age, and every bit of it counts. Studies show that even small increases in lean muscle mass can lower diabetes risk by significant percentages. A body with more muscle mass is like a fortress against blood sugar spikes. Even if you eat a meal high in carbohydrates, your muscles can step in and buffer that glucose surge, keeping your blood levels stable and preventing long-term damage. This is not just theory. People who lift weights 2 to 3 times per week, even for short sessions, show better fasting glucose levels, lower insulin resistance, and reduced risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And the benefits go beyond glucose. Healthy muscle improves overall metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch between burning fat and sugar for fuel. This flexibility keeps energy levels steady and prevents the highs and crashes that come with poor glucose control. The beauty of this truth is its simplicity. You don't need to understand every detail of metabolism to put it into action. All you need to know is that your muscles are your best defense against one of the most destructive chronic diseases of our time. They are your metabolic armor, protecting you silently every day. With every rep, every step, every contraction, your muscles are guarding your blood sugar, reducing your reliance on insulin, and shielding you from diabetes. So when you think of muscle, don't think only of strength or appearance. Think of protection. Think of resilience. Think of the armor you are building against diabetes every time you choose to move, lift, or train. In a world where diabetes is one of the fastest growing health crises, your best defense isn't found in a pill bottle. It is found in the strength and health of your own muscles. Loss of muscle with age accelerates insulin resistance and rapid aging. One of the most overlooked consequences of aging is not simply wrinkles or gray hair, but the gradual loss of muscle tissue, a condition called sarcopenia. Starting as early as the 30s, most people lose about 3 to 5% of their muscle mass per decade, and this process accelerates after the age of 50. While many accept this as a natural part of aging, the truth is that muscle loss is not only optional but dangerous. It does more than reduce strength and independence, it directly accelerates insulin resistance and speeds up the biological aging process at every level. Insulin resistance is the condition in which cells no longer respond effectively to insulin, forcing the pancreas to release more of it in order to control blood sugar. Over time, this leads to chronically high insulin and glucose levels, which damage tissues, increase fat storage, and drive metabolic diseases such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease. The largest site of glucose disposal in the body is muscle. When you lose muscle mass, you lose the capacity to take up glucose efficiently. This forces blood sugar to remain elevated longer after meals, and it puts greater demand on insulin to push that glucose into fewer available muscle fibers. The less muscle you have, the more resistant your body becomes, and the cycle of insulin resistance accelerates. This is why older adults are disproportionately affected by diabetes. It is not simply age itself that raises risk, but the muscle loss that usually comes with it. A younger person with plenty of muscle mass has large reservoirs to store glucose safely, but an older person with diminished muscle mass has far less storage capacity. The body is left with fewer options, and glucose lingers in the bloodstream, damaging arteries, nerves, and organs. In this way, the decline of muscle mass is one of the hidden engines driving the epidemic of diabetes in aging populations. The problem does not stop at insulin resistance. Loss of muscle also accelerates the broader processes of aging. Muscle is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the body, meaning it burns calories even at rest and supports overall energy balance. With less muscle, metabolism slows, fat gain increases, and inflammation rises. Fat, particularly visceral fat around the organs, releases inflammatory molecules that further impair insulin sensitivity in damaged tissues. This combination of low muscle and high fat sets the stage for rapid biological aging. It creates a body that is weaker, slower, more inflamed, and less able to repair itself. Muscle loss also compromises mitochondrial function. Mitochondria, the tiny energy factories in your cells, decline with age, but active muscle is one of the best ways to maintain their efficiency. When muscle is lost, mitochondrial numbers and performance decline further, leading to fatigue, reduced endurance, and cellular aging. This mitochondrial decline is closely tied to many age-related diseases, from neurodegeneration to cardiovascular issues. By losing muscle, you accelerate the breakdown of these critical power plants, hastening the aging process at the cellular level. What makes this even more concerning is that muscle loss often goes unnoticed until it is severe. People may notice they cannot lift as much as they used to, or they feel weaker and tire more easily. But by the time these symptoms are obvious, years of damage to glucose metabolism and cellular health have already occurred. Preventing and reversing muscle loss early is one of the most important strategies for slowing both insulin resistance and aging. The good news is that this process is not inevitable. Resistance training, weight-bearing exercise, and sufficient protein intake can not only preserve muscle mass but even build it well into later decades of life. Studies consistently show that older adults who train their muscles 2 or 3 times per week improve insulin sensitivity, lower blood sugar, and reduce their risk of metabolic disease. At the same time, they maintain independence, energy, and vitality, proving that muscle is as much a marker of youth as it is of strength. In short, muscle loss with age is not just a cosmetic issue or a matter of frailty. It is a metabolic emergency. Each pound of muscle lost reduces your body's capacity to handle glucose, accelerates insulin resistance, and speeds up the decline of cellular health. By fighting muscle loss, you are not only preserving strength, you are slowing the very process of aging. Every workout, every rep, and every step you take is a direct investment in maintaining metabolic health and defending against the rapid aging that so many assume is unavoidable. Every contraction of your muscle acts like medicine, pulling sugar out of the blood. It is easy to think of exercise as something we do for fitness, for strength, or for weight loss, but beneath the surface, each movement of your muscles is a profound act of medicine. When muscles contract, whether during a walk, lifting weights, climbing stairs, or even simply standing up from a chair, they send signals to the body that trigger glucose uptake. Unlike most cells, which depend on insulin to allow glucose entry, muscle fibers have a unique ability to pull sugar from the bloodstream directly through contraction. This makes muscle activity one of the most immediate and effective ways to lower blood sugar naturally. To understand why this matters, consider what happens after a carbohydrate-rich meal. Blood sugar rises, and insulin is released in an attempt to move glucose into the cells. In someone who is sedentary or insulin-resistant, this process is slow and inefficient. Glucose lingers in the blood, insulin levels climb higher, and over time this repeated pattern contributes to diabetes, weight gain, and inflammation. But when muscles contract, a different pathway opens. Glucose transporters move to the surface of muscle cells and allow sugar to enter independent of insulin. This means that even if insulin sensitivity is low, your muscles can act immediately to clear sugar from the blood. The effect is so powerful that some researchers compare a single bout of exercise to a dose of medication. After just one session of muscle contractions, blood sugar regulation improves for up to 24 hours. This is why going for a walk after a meal can dramatically lower post-meal glucose spikes. It is not about burning huge amounts of calories, it is about activating muscle tissue to act as a glucose sink. Every step, every rep, every contraction is like a prescription, lowering blood sugar in real time and protecting the body from the damage of glucose highs. What makes this process even more valuable is its independence from insulin. In people with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, cells often resist the effects of insulin, requiring more and more of it to move glucose. This constant demand exhausts the pancreas and worsens insulin resistance. But muscle contractions bypass that broken system, giving the body an alternate route for sugar disposal. This means exercise is not only complementary to insulin, it is a replacement for it in many ways. The muscles themselves become the medicine, doing the job that drugs or injections are often asked to do. The long-term impact of repeated contractions is even more profound. With consistent muscle activity, insulin sensitivity improves, meaning cells respond better to insulin and less of it is needed to manage blood sugar. Over time, this lowers fasting glucose levels, reduces the burden on the pancreas, and helps reverse insulin resistance. In addition, contracting muscles release molecules called myokines, which have anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body. These compounds protect blood vessels, improve brain function, and support overall metabolic health. In this way, each muscle contraction is not just pulling sugar out of the blood, but also sending healing signals that touch nearly every organ. Even small amounts of movement carry this benefit. A few minutes of light activity after sitting for hours can cut post-meal glucose by measurable amounts. This explains why sedentary lifestyles are so damaging to health. It is not just about burning fewer calories, it is about losing the daily medicine of muscle contractions. When muscles remain inactive, sugar builds up in the blood, insulin surges, and inflammation spreads. The simple act of moving can reverse that cycle immediately. This perspective changes how we should think about exercise. It is not a punishment for eating, nor is it merely a way to shape the body. It is a prescription that you can take every day without side effects. The more often you contract your muscles, the more often you are dosing yourself with natural medicine. For someone at risk of diabetes, this can mean the difference between progressing to disease or regaining metabolic health. For someone already struggling with high blood sugar, it can mean reducing reliance on medications and regaining control of their body. The beauty of this truth is in its accessibility. You don't need a gym, special equipment, or hours of time. Standing, stretching, walking, or using your own body weight is enough to activate the glucose-clearing power of muscle contractions. Of course, more structured resistance training brings even greater benefits, but the principle remains: movement is medicine. With every contraction, your muscles are silently protecting you, lowering your blood sugar, reducing your insulin demand, and extending your health span. So the next time you move your body, remember this: it is not just exercise, it is not just fitness, it is medicine prescribed by nature, delivered instantly by your own muscles, and more effective than most drugs could ever be. Every contraction is a dose of health, and the more you use it, the more resilient your body becomes. Muscle is the difference between merely living long and living strong. Longevity has become a buzzword in today's world, with many people searching for ways to add more years to their lives. But adding years is not the same as adding quality. What good is living to 90 if those final decades are spent in frailty, weakness, and dependence? The real goal is not just lifespan, but health span. The years of life spent healthy, capable, and independent. And the factor that most clearly separates those who merely live long from those who live strong is muscle. Muscle is the tissue that allows you to move through the world with freedom. It is what enables you to climb stairs, carry groceries, get up from a chair, or play with your grandchildren. Without sufficient muscle, even basic tasks become exhausting. The decline in muscle mass with age, known as sarcopenia, is one of the leading reasons older adults lose independence. But muscle is more than physical ability. It is a direct reflection of metabolic health, resilience, and vitality. Stronger people, studies show, are not only less likely to fall or break bones, they are less likely to develop chronic diseases and more likely to live longer, healthier lives. The science behind this is striking. People with greater muscle mass and strength have lower risks of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and even cognitive decline. This is not a coincidence. Muscle acts as a reservoir for glucose, a stabilizer of metabolism, and a producer of anti-inflammatory molecules that protect every organ in the body. In contrast, low muscle mass is linked to insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and faster biological aging. The message is clear: muscle is not just about physical power, it is about staying biologically younger for longer. Consider the difference between two people of the same age. One has maintained muscle through regular resistance training and activity. The other has allowed muscle to waste away through inactivity. The first individual not only looks and feels younger, but their cells are younger. Their mitochondria are stronger, their blood sugar is more stable, their bones are more resilient, and their immune system is more responsive. The second individual may live just as many years, but those years will be filled with fatigue, frailty, medications, and hospital visits. Muscle makes the difference between those two outcomes. What makes this truth even more powerful is that muscle is highly responsive at any age. Research shows that people in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s can build new muscle through resistance training. This means it is never too late to choose strength. Every rep, every contraction, every bit of effort adds not just years to your life, but life to your years. Building muscle improves balance, lowers fall risk, preserves independence, and allows older adults to continue living life on their own terms. That is the essence of living strong. It is important to realize that the pursuit of muscle is not about vanity or body image. It is about resilience. A body with more muscle withstands stress better, recovers from illness faster, and resists the decline that many assume is inevitable with aging. Muscle protects bones from fractures, joints from instability, and organs from the metabolic chaos of excess glucose. In short, muscle makes the body durable, adaptable, and capable of thriving even in the face of challenges. Living long is often a matter of luck, genetics, and advances in modern medicine. But living strong is a choice, a daily investment in movement, training, and nutrition that preserves the foundation of health. Muscle is the one factor that connects strength, metabolism, independence, and longevity into a single package. Without it, life may continue, but it is limited, constrained, and dependent. With it, life is expanded, empowered, and full of possibility. So when we talk about aging gracefully, we must look beyond just years on the calendar. We must ask, how strong is the body carrying those years? Are we adding days to life, or are we adding life to days? The difference lies in muscle. Because in the end, muscle does not just help you live longer, it helps you live better. It is the difference between merely existing and fully thriving, between surviving and truly living strong.